So we're going to be talking today about why does my saddle sit crooked on my horse. Have you ever, if you take a look as I come into the camera, you can see this saddle's off center. Now I've sort of artificially created this, but have you ever had a saddle, or is this a familiar motion to you? And then you go sometimes one trip around your pen, or a quarter of a mile, or 50 feet, and you're doing this again. So if that's familiar to you, hopefully what we're going to talk about today will help you, because there are a number of different situations with your saddle, with your horse, with yourself that can lead to this problem. So we're going to go through them. I do not claim to be an expert on saddle fit, on horse conformation, on how to pad a horse, but I'm going to cheerfully talk about all those things all the same, because it's something we all do, whether we're experts or not. I've made tons of mistakes, and maybe the next guy can benefit from that. So I'm going to fix this one more time, and then we're going to go look at the problem. So we're here to follow up on the my saddle doesn't sit straight problem. If me and my horse both look a little soggy and wilted, we got caught in the rain, and we're both going to live through it, but it didn't help our camera readiness any. So first thing to consider when your saddle sits crooked, or the first thing I think about is, does your saddle fit your horse, and what's your horse's back conformation? I'm not saying that that's the biggest, most common problem. There are other things that are actually more common, and I'm actually going to go through about 8 different things in no particular order, but I will identify the one thing as we go that I think is the most prevalent. So you look at this horse, he's built to carry a saddle. He's got a prominent wither. It's not overly sharp, but I mean it's up there, and a saddle will sit right there and will sit solid. He's got a reasonably short back, not so short that a saddle bridges his back, not so long that a saddle kind of gets lost up there. So if you've got a round-shouldered horse, a saddle may tend to roll on him. If you have a horse that is real sharp-withered, that saddle may get down and rub him. It's probably not going to roll. It's probably going to be nice and secure, but it can make your horse uncomfortable. So how your horse is built and how your saddle fits is absolutely an issue. If your horse is a little round-shouldered, the saddle's going to have a real tendency to roll. And depending, it's going to roll one way or another more frequently. So you're going to end up with a crooked saddle a lot more if your horse is real round in the withers. People like to pad their horses and sometimes over-pad them. If you've got a round horse, my suggestion is, subject to the requirement of keeping that horse comfortable, don't put any more pad on that horse than you need to, because that's going to just accentuate the fact that the horse is round. If you over-pad a horse that's already round, you're just going to create more rock and roll. Second thing that you see is pads that are too thick, that are really prone to make a situation where the saddle will roll. So what I prefer, and then I'll show you a couple things that I'm less fond of, I use 2 pads rather than one thick one. The thickest pad I want to use, and the thickest pad I virtually ever put on a horse, is 3/4 of an inch. But if I need a little bit more pad, I'll put a second pad on. So this is a pure felt pad. It's I like the natural stuff. It's wool. And then on top of that, I'll put a second pad, in this case a Navajo type blanket, and we'll center that up. And what that does is, being 2 separate pads, they don't want to roll as one unit. They sort of have their own integrity, and that pad will hold better in my experience. And also, you've got the 2 layers, you got some dead space, you got some differing materials. So you actually get a little more bang for your buck than with just a big, thick pad. There are so many pads on the market these days that are really, really thick. Now I've got a pad here, and I'm not saying anything bad about the pad, the way it's made, or who made it. But this pad is probably thicker than my two pads put together. When you put this on, you're setting up a situation where this whole unit will rock. If you mechanically move this pad when there's no saddle on, it will roll easier than what the two pads will when they're used together on a horse's back. So these big thick pads, this pad's probably 1.5 inches. My Navajo and my under pad there, it's a 3/4 inch under, might be 1 inch total. That's plenty enough for most horses. And if you need a little more, what I'll sometimes do, at least for work, is I'll use a pad liner. Saves your good pad too. This is probably, this is a 1/2 inch pad liner. You go with your 3/4 inch, if my math is right, that gives you 1.25 inches. But it's in 2 units, so you put the pad liner on first, and then you go to your, what would normally be your under pad, and that gives you a little bit more pad, but you still have the 2 pieces. So you're not going to get as much roll. I mean, if you look at that, see how that sits compared to that thicker pad? You can just tell, even without a saddle, that that wants to have more purchase on your horse's back. So those are a couple of things that really do make a difference. Your horse's conformation, how your saddle fits your horse, and how much pad you're using on that particular horse. Now, the other thing that can make a difference is how you set your saddle on your horse. And I will say something politically incorrect about short people. There's a lot of disadvantages to being too damn tall, and I've lived with them my whole life, because I'm 6'5" and I'm awkward. But the one thing I'm not real awkward at is putting a saddle on, because I've got enough vertical size to make it kind of easy. So I'll put my saddle on, and I used to say to people, well, this is the way to saddle a horse. And somebody'd say, damn it, I'm 5'4", you're 6'5". It doesn't work the same way for me. But what I do is I just take the whole mess over the side, lay the saddle on, square it up. But if you're shorter, that's going to be harder. But what you don't want to do, regardless of your height, is, so maybe I get down on my hands and knees, I could do this. If you're down like this, don't get your saddle to here and stop. Because I'll see people, I mean, you can stop, but then go back and square it up. But I see people draw their saddle up when it is that far off center. They're just creating the situation, maybe that didn't even need to exist, by having their saddle off center to start with. Now I'm going to do something I don't usually do, because I got a big list of things. So I'm going to look at my cheat sheet here. The other thing that comes into play is how your rigging is adjusted. So these saddles have, most saddles are going to have a couple of D's in the middle. You want your girth to be set on your rigging so that those D's are right about in the middle of your horse's belly. And if it's offset more than a bit to each side, you're going to create a situation where the saddle can easily become offset to one side or the other. So here, I'm just about at the center. And when I finish drawing the saddle, after we ride him a bit and he exhales, it's going to be about the same and right dead in the middle. Step over, all the way over. But if you look, This side of the rigging is going to pretty closely match. Go on, Simon. This side. This side's a little longer, but you can see I'm already going to be drawing it up to where it matches. It will be more likely that your saddle will shift to the side that is shorter, where the girth ring is closer to the cinch ring. So that's another thing that can affect, whether your saddle is going to sit crooked. Another thing that creates difficulty, again, short folks often have trouble pulling a cinch. I don't claim to be particularly strong, but again, my mechanics are helped by being up here. So you draw this and it goes straight up and the saddle stays straight. But I should get my friend over here who is about 1.25 feet shorter than me. Somebody that height, when they drag it or when they draw it, there's going to be a tendency to get back here and that saddle will tend to shift over there. Then you've got your saddle drawn down crooked. You'll see that typically going to the left for that reason. A couple of ways you can address that. One is to draw up as straight as you possibly can. I actually would suggest you might want to just step up on a muck bucket if it's hard for you and get that mechanical advantage. If your horse will stand, then you'll be as tall as I am. And you can draw the saddle pretty darn tight. The other thing you can do is to take your free hand, push on the horn, see, and that keeps your saddle straight. And that's something that I do because I've been known to pull a saddle crooked, and so I'll do that to brace it and keep it straight. So that is something else that you can do that will help you to not get that saddle started out crooked. Another thing that makes a difference is how you get on. Some of us get on a horse, it kind of looks like a pirate trying to board a ship. They're crawling up, it looks like you ought to have ropes and pulleys and grappling hooks. And I used to be really impatient with people who did that. Then I got a few more birthdays and I got my grappling hook out. So I'm very aware of the fact that you can pry a saddle off to the side when you get on. I have a love-hate relationship with mounting blocks and things like that. I sort of feel like you're giving something up when you don't just step up on a horse under your own power. But if it compromises the horse's comfort or pulls your saddle off center or hurts you, use that stuff. And I'll tell you what, if my wheels are particularly rusty, I got a muck bucket sitting right next to the pen I'll climb up on. And my pride my pride dissolved a long time ago. So how you get on definitely can make a difference, because if you get that saddle yanked off to the side when you're getting on, and it will, then you're going to have a problem. Actually, this saddle fits this horse well enough that that's actually not terrible, and you'd probably straighten it up pretty quick. But with a little less precise fit, could be a bigger problem. So we're getting down to the ones that really make a difference. How you sit a horse, whether you lean or not a bit, can make a huge difference. I have a friend who rides pushing to the left so hard that all the holes in his stirrup leathers get kind of egged out and extended and sometimes pull through on that side because he's just that lopsided in the way he sits to that side, and it's something he's worked a long time to try to correct, but it comes back, and you can see it literally the way the saddle wears. So if you sit real crooked, you're gonna move your saddle off to the side. Now, we had an episode involving that. My son-in-law Dalton was riding around at one of the horse shows, and I said to my friend Buck Hawes, Dalton's getting into a habit where he leans to the left something fierce. And I don't know what to do with it, Buck says, I can fix that. Let me borrow him for a minute. And what he did, and you got to remember, guys like Buck Hawes, guys like me, we sort of came from the school of hard knocks. So oftentimes our fixes are crude but effective. So Buck took the cinch, Dalton's already on the horse, he loosens it up from there to about there. I mean, I think you probably could have thrown a cat between the cinch and the horse. And he says, there boy, lean all you want. And the leaning stopped pretty damn quick. Now, what would have happened if he'd kept leaning might not have been pretty to look at, but, you know, that's, you know, how you find out what kind of son-in-law you have. So, that is not a fix I would recommend, but be aware if you're leaning one way or another, and work on adjusting that. And that plays right into the last reason why your saddle may sit crooked, and it may also be a reason why you sit crooked. And that is, sometimes we're built with one leg a little longer than the other. Sometimes, even though we think we have our saddle adjusted in the same hole on both sides, maybe one stirrup leather has stretched out a bit. Maybe it was never completely correct. Maybe over time it has just changed a bit, and you need to adjust that. I like these stirrup leathers here. The holes are probably, can you get that? Is that too far away? The holes on this are probably a ½ inch apart, instead of, sometimes your holes for your Blevins buckle are an inch apart or almost 2 inches apart. That's a huge adjustment. But if you've got a little leg length discrepancy, or if you've got your saddle shifting off to one side, you are probably shifting to the side where the stirrup is longer. That's what tends to happen. So if you shorten the stirrup on the side where the saddle is in other words, if your right stirrup is too long, your saddle's probably going to shift to the right. If your left stirrup's a little too long, the opposite. Adjust that stirrup up a small amount. You may, if you've got a big broad stretch in your stirrup leather settings, punch a hole in the middle. Make a smaller adjustment, because it doesn't take much a lot of times. And that's been the single biggest cause I've found of having a saddle go crooked. When I was riding him around in the beginning with this saddle that fits him well, fits me well, never shifts to the side, all I did was lengthen my left stirrup 2 of those little holes, and it shifted that saddle as much as what it looked like at the beginning, even on a saddle that really fits well and a horse that really holds a saddle well. So that would be the first thing I'd look at. If I'm going off to the right, let's just raise that right stirrup and see if that affects things. And you may try everything and it may not work, and then you know what? You're on your own. Because some problems are beyond me, and sometimes you just have to experiment till you come up with an answer. But I'll tell you, a crooked saddle will make your horse uncomfortable, it'll compromise your cues, and it will make you uncomfortable over time. If you ride a horse with a crooked saddle for a while, it gets you in the hip, it gets you in the knee, so it can't feel good to the horse either. So it's something that should be dealt with. Hopefully one of these thoughts, the way your horse is padded, how the saddle fits your horse's body type, how you draw the saddle, how you get on, and where your rigging is, one side to the other, and most particularly, your stirrup length. Try all of those things. Start with the stirrup length, work your way through. One final thing that I didn't think of. I've got a saddle that I use on colts and has a big wide roper cinch. Sometimes that is real helpful in just drawing your saddle down a little nicer, spreading out that pull over your horse's belly. I like it on colts because they're a little touchy anyway, tend to get a little sore. That broad cinch that tapers down works well for that. So that would be another option. I suspect somebody might say, what about a breast collar? What about a back cinch? Well, a back cinch isn't going to help you. The only way it would conceivably help you is if your saddle was tipping forward and sort of rolling off a pivot point, but that would be pretty unusual. Same way with a breast collar. That's not going to help you side to side. It'll darn sure help you if your saddle tends to slip back. And if you have a real long backed horse and the saddle tends to slip back, it might have a tendency to shift sideways. So in that limited circumstance, a breast collar might help you. But for the most part, you're not going to get any real help out of those two pieces of equipment for a saddle that sits crooked. So that's a long answer to a problem that has a lot of different angles to it. Hopefully it'll help you guys. Let me know if you've had a saddle that sits crooked and you managed to fix it. And if you did something else that I didn't think of, darn sure let me know, because I may need it somewhere down the line too. Thanks, till next time.